Winter's hitting, ladies and gentlemen, and that means it's time to get a little chilly and slow down. Lexi Deck Tech coming at ya. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Hometown TCG. My name is Josh, and I'm here bringing you what might be my favorite deck tech to date. That's right, we're talking some Ice Lexi today, and there is some spice in this deck. If you are a patron at patreon.com/HometownTCG, you've had this deck in your hands for over a week now, complete with fully fleshed out deck guide that explains matchup strategies, equipment boarding, why cards are in there, what the deck wants to do, and exactly how to play it. I'll link that post in this video's description. But for now, we got some spicy Lexi tech to talk about. And if you guys are following us on stream, you have seen me spamming this deck over at Twitch, and we are 100% loving it. So let's get into this Frost Lexi deck. And that's right away you can see two bows. This deck makes use of both bows depending on matchup, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. What we do with the start of every deck, guys, is we say, what does our deck want to do? We come up with some kind of deck theory, a deck goal. And I got a lot of say in this deck goal because I got to tell you, I love hit effects and I absolutely love shock charmers. When this card was spoiled, I went bonkers. I thought it was amazing. I was just super hyped. I was probably way too hyped about that card, but I love it so much. I leaned in and said, no, I want to build a deck around this. So this deck is built around shock charmers and trying to double up or double trigger some of your hit effects. So I love this deck. This deck is built around this card. I love this card, but that means we're going to need a lot of pitch, guys. Shock charmers, not a cheap card. So if you notice on our stats down here, we are running a lot of low cost and a ton of blue. So a lot more blue that you would normally see in a deck to supplement that level of cost. So that's a very exciting way. This is a really cool deck to build. It was really fun to build around. Let's talk the rest of the equipment package. Our main chess piece in the equipment is going to be the Findel Spring Tunic. We talked about needing pitch. This deck is kind of control-y. It's an ice deck, so it draws out games. This is going to generate a lot of value throughout the game. Findel Spring Tunic's great for us. Pretty standard headpiece with New Horizon. And to round out our main foot equipment is the Perch Grapplers. The Go Again, not super useful in this deck. It's mostly there because it is a 2-block card. Some of the supplemental pieces, we see that as Shivers your main bow, instead of Shivers your main bow, Voltaire is your kind of secondary bow for certain matchups, and that couples with the concept of Bullseye Bracers here. We found into the hard control matchup, into the Oldhim game, and Oldhim is tier 1 in Blitz right now. Into that Oldhim game, we struggled hard without a package to try to go wide, leak some of this damage, really push through. So we had to add Voltaire, and we had to add the Bullseye Bracers to have a turn where you can possibly throw 3 arrows, maybe generate 3 hit effects, even if you don't just push through some damage. 100% necessary in this matchup. The backup chess piece is Heart of Ice, incredible in the defensive matchup. We mentioned Oldhim, full control dash if you happen to run into one of those. It's okay in Ira. I think there's still an argument for Spring Tunic. I think I prefer Spring Tunic into Ira over Heart of Ice. You really only target Flip Flax unless you know you're in a full defensive Ira. But Kano, this card shines in the Kano matchup. And the fact that there's Arcane Barrier on this card is bonkers. This card is great. You do see we have the rest of the Null Rune package in here to round out your Null Rune 4. We don't want to be soft and fold the Kano. And it's actually not a terrible matchup because we do run so many blues like we talk about and have so many detrimental hit effects that Kano feels like they must block. So this is your equipment setup. Visit the deck guide if you want to know exactly which equipment run in each matchup. It's tons of fun. I love this deck. Let's get in to the meat and potatoes. So as I mentioned, we're not running a single non-arrow attack in this deck. We're very much leaning into the concept of arrows, and you can see that in our arrow packages. Right away, our elemental arrow packages, you're seeing Blizzard Bolt, you're seeing Chilling Ice Vein, you're seeing Frost Lock, Cold Wave. There's a lot of hit effects on a lot of different arrows. They're attacking for 5. We decided to go with just the reds here instead of the yellows. We found we needed blue pitch and hit effects in most matchups. Even the blue arrows in a pinch with a buff and dominated can satisfy those. So your blue arrows are great. They all block for 3. They all pitch blue, which means they trigger shock charmers. And in the long game, when stuff is coming back around, it's not the best, but as long as you pitch a couple buffs early, it's not the worst. There is a couple weird cards in here that you're going to notice that don't really fit the rest of the deck strategy. Things like your Endless Arrow, things like 3 of a Kind, things like Bolt and Shot. This package is specifically in this deck to try to get over the top on the control matchup, into your Oldims, into your hard control dash. Sometimes when you have to transition to Voltaire, you still need some gas. You need some things to be able to threaten multiple arrows a turn. You need to be able to threaten these free arrows. You need to be able to threaten these hit effects with Endless Arrow, putting it back in your hand, throwing it again. Bolt and Shot, reload to be able to throw a 3rd arrow without breaking your bullseye bracers. These hit effects and being able to go wide are 100% necessary in a lot of these matchups. So this package has to be in the deck, but it doesn't play too poorly in the Frost version when you're running Shiver as well. When you're running Shiver and you're really leaning into Shiver, sometimes an Endless Arrow being able to be arsenal thrown for free, have the threat to put it back in your hand, is exactly what you need after blocking out. You're mitigating that damage, you're playing the slow game, maybe you got a Channel Lake Frigid in play. It's not a bad strategy. I'm a big fan of that card. Bolt and Shot here to possibly reload something that maybe you don't have in Arsenal, flip it up, be able to have a second Arsenal target. There's a lot of weird synergies, cool synergies there if you got an empty Arsenal. Bolt and Shot's very cool. The one questionable card on here that I replaced recently in the deck, and this is new tech as of the last 36 hours, is Nimblism buffs every attack with cost 1 or less. That's very cool, but there's no reason not to run Icequake here. Icequake is free. It buffs things for 3 regardless of the fusion status, and if you happen to have a Pulse of Volthaven comboed with the Icequake, you can pull off some pretty awesome stuff. So replacing the Nimblisms with the Icequakes, if you got them, I think is a good move. There's no non-arrows in the deck, so nothing is affected. There's really no downside. I think the Nimblism gets replaced with the Icequake immediately. Moving on to some of our blues that we're using to kind of supplement our cards, not even blues, cards we're using to supplement our hit effects. We do have the Icequake. Whenever an attack hits a hero this turn, they create a Frostbite. This is a little bit of a nombo with Shock Charmers. It's a little bit of a trap. Remember, if you have Icequake out there, don't try to double trigger Shock Charmers. Icequake does not double trigger with the Shock Charmers hit effect, or with the damage effect, because it's whenever an attack hits, and presumably the attack has already hit. We are running Winter's Bite. I think it's just a great ice blue. Polar Blast, I'm actually a little bit down on. I was very in love with the card. It does replace itself. It's got the option to give Dominate. It's in here because in the Voltaire matchup, you need something to threaten Dominate, and your Weave Ices and your Polar Blasts are great for that. It does replace itself, so it's definitely not bad, and it satisfies ice. Your Weave Ices, like we talked about, are essential in the control matchup, and they're just great in the aggro matchup. You can get an extra little buff out of it because maybe it does give itself Dominate. It's a great fusion arsenal target. Running both the blue and the red, the blue really shines in the control matchup where you can pitch it, maybe have Dominate on an arrow late in the game to close something out after all the defense reactions have been exhausted. It's a very good card. Frostlock into the zero cost Briar is just absurd. That card can be so good. Have been loving Frostlock. It doesn't do a lot of work into some of your controller matchups, or maybe even Chain now that Chain's not playing Seeds of Agony. However, it's a blue that blocks for 3, so it just fits what the rest of the deck wants to do. Frostlock is a total dub here. We're only running 1 copy of Blizzard. I found often that if you drew a hand with both Blizzards, not only were you in trouble, but it could be game losing. and it slowed an opponent down, but not as much as I wanted it to. I still like the card. I still love the effect, especially at the right time. I'm still running 1 Blizzard here, but 2 seem to be a bit of an overkill. Your only lightning card in the deck, if you do swap out the Nimblisms for the Icequakes, is the Pulse of Volthaven. It's just a good buff, right? It can flip up, it can give you go again if you need it. If you're trying to do an arrow into dropping a Channel Lake Frigid or something like that, you're trying to maybe psych your opponent out, get them to block weird, whatever it may be. And then finally, 3 of a Kind was only put in for the go wide Voltaire into control strategy. But honestly, off blocking out, and maybe playing this from Arsenal or playing this from hand after blocking with 3 cards off of a Tunic counter or something like that, being able to reload and try to throw some pressure back at your opponent is just insane. It's so good in either package. Make sure you don't get caught in the trap of trying to use it to go wide if you're playing the Shiver package. But in the event you got to block a lot of damage, you can still 3 of a Kind, try to high roll into something, throw something back. Worst case scenario, grab yourself an Ice Arsenal target for next turn. It just does everything the deck wants to do. So this is kind of the overview of the deck. And remember, the whole concept is to hit your Blizzard Bolts and your Chilling Ice Veins and double those hit effects with Shock Charmers. Blizzard Bolt does read, if Blizzard Bolt is used whenever an attack deals damage, and Shock Charmers then stacks on an additional damage. So Blizzard Bolt is probably my favorite. You're often able to, create 2 Frostbite tokens off of a fused and dominated Blizzard Bolt. Chilling Ice Vein's a weird one. You can catch a lot of opponents in a trap. A lot of people aren't used to playing against Shock Charmers. So if they happen to, they think they got a lot of reds, you don't think they have a yellow, or you think they have a blue, you can make them pitch inefficiently by double triggering the Chilling Ice Vein. And really what you're doing at that point is you're taxing their turn more so than you're worried about the extra damage. The extra damage over the long course of a game does start to make a difference. There are a couple Nombos in the deck, a couple non-combos in the deck. Your Weave Ices into your Bolton Shots and your Endless Arrows, things that are buffing your elemental attacks. So just pretty much just your Weave Ices in here. That's a little bit of a Nombo. A lot of times you'll see Weave Ice, you'll see Bolton Shot, you'll be like, oh my goodness, I have a free 7 here, free 8 if you got a Tunic counter. Not quite, right? It doesn't quite buff your non-elemental arrows. So same goes with Remorseless, right? That might be an argument to pull Remorseless and maybe look for a yellow elemental arrow. I know that's the craziest thing, but I don't think you do, because Remorseless is just too good of a card. The effect at the end of a game to really lock your opponent out of trying to crack back too wide is so good. Dodging defense reactions, I think there's no chance that you cut Remorseless for anything else. You just deal with a little bit of the Nombo. Finally, to close this out, unsung MVP of this deck, definitely Channel Lake Frigid. Guys, dropping a Channel Lake Frigid late in the game or even early on a key opponent's turn when they're trying to go off just high rolls you into being able to do so many things. Shock Charmers, having Shock Charmers in the deck does allow you to keep it around for maybe an extra turn, maybe a turn more than you would have otherwise, because you do have a pitch, or essentially a sack outlet, you have a pitch outlet. It's just absolute gas. Channel Lake Frigid, you don't think you're going to be able to keep it around. You 3 of a Kind, you high roll into 2 more ice cards, you just pitch them to Shock Charmers, keep Channel Lake Frigid around, keep your opponents locked down for another turn, cycle your gas to the end of the deck. It's so much fun. It's such a key card in this matchup. Don't get one down too early. A lot of times people fall in the trap. We see Channel Lake Frigid, we just slam it, right? A lot of times you flip it up in your arsenal and you show your opponent, you say, hey opponent, I have Channel Lake Frigid. They start playing around the Channel Lake Frigid before you slam it. There's a good option there to keep the Channel Lake Frigid in your arsenal. Just keep the threat alive and keep them thinking about when you're going to drop it. Try to get the feel for the game, drop it at just the right time. It's such a cool card. I absolutely love it. But guys, this is one of my favorite decks that we've ever built on the channel. I got to use one of my favorite deck building concepts as far as, leaning into a strategy like hit effects, and I got to use one of my favorite cards since it was spoiled for the first time. I'm 100% loving this. John and I put a ton of time in this. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, and be ready for our next deck tech. We got another deck guide coming out to our patrons later this week at patreon.com/HometownTCG. We're stoked to get you that, and that means a week from now, we got another deck guide coming to you. And I'll give you a hint. He's an old man. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun. Get out to your armories, play this deck. Let me know what you think. Until next time, my name is Josh, and I will catch you on our live stream tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central Time. We're going to jam some Blitz. We hope to see you there. Goodbye.